Do you know what a beaver is? As a Canadian, knowing about the noble beaver is taught in school along with all lyrics to every Celine Dion song ever. But I was brought back down to earth when I tried to have a conversation about the magnificent beaver with my non-Canadian friends. Apparently, knowing all about beavers isn't common knowledge around the world. So, I think it's time for a Canadian PSA. Beavers are the national animal of Canada. America has the eagle, India has a tiger, Scotland has the unicorn. But Canada, we have the beaver. Sure, beavers may be a semi-aquatic rodent, which doesn't sound the coolest. Okay, they're not the most imposing animal, but by the end of this video, you're gonna have a newfound respect for them. They're the second largest living rodent. They have these large, flat, scaly tails, and they spend their day chewing on wood to build dams where they live. These dams help create wetlands, which are key to preserving ecosystems. Suck it, Scotland! Who needs a unicorn when you have a habitat-protecting rodent that recognizes its family through secretions from their anal glands? Yeah, I forgot to mention that part. It's still kind of cool, right? Now that we've covered the basics, we can get to the best part. The food! When you think about Canadian food, or if you think about Canadian food at all, you might think about poutine or butter tarts or maple syrup. But you could have also heard about beaver tails. Beaver tails have been described as a kind of pizza donut hybrid in the shape of a beaver tail. They can be covered in any number of sugary goodness spread things like Nutella or peanut butter or cinnamon sugar. The beaver tail dessert brand was only started in the 1970s, but its popularity has exploded. When Obama came to visit Canada, beaver tail is the Canadian food he chose to try. As Canadian food go, that's really as high profile as you can get. But there's a problem. While deep-fried donutty beaver tails are getting all the attention, Canada and the world are missing out on something kind of big. Beaver tails are actually a pretty bad indication of what Canadian food is. They're not based on any Canadian recipe, but a German dessert dish. They don't use any Canadian ingredients. Really, they don't say anything about Canada, its food, or its culture, except for the fact that we like deep-fried things covered in sugar. But really, who doesn't? And while I have nothing against beaver tail the dessert, it's deep-fried dough covered in sugar. All the fame and attention it gets kind of does overshadow a dish that actually does say something about Canadian food and history and culture. Beaver. Yeah, as in actually eating a beaver. Beaver are a traditional food of Canada's Indigenous communities and have been eaten for thousands of years. If you don't know what I mean when I say Indigenous peoples, it's a collective name for the original inhabitants of the land that is now known as Canada and their descendants. It's a community of over 1.6 million people and is made up of diverse groups from across the country. Indigenous culture, language, and social systems have shaped the development of Canada. However, since the onset of colonization, Indigenous culture and livelihood have been severely threatened by colonial forces. There's a long, sad, and appalling history of discrimination against Indigenous communities across the country that is frankly too complex and disturbing to get into in a short YouTube video. But if you know anything about colonialism, you can guess just how bad it was and still is. To learn more about beavers, my initial thoughts were that I should hitchhike to Scotland, where they're trying to reintroduce them to Europe. But then I realized we're in the middle of the pandemic, that's illegal, and I would definitely get eaten by a feral Scot before I managed to track down any beavers. Thankfully, I've managed to find some experts who actually know what they're talking about when it comes to Indigenous food and beaver.
Well, my name is Mark Bell, and I am a band counselor for Airland First Nation, but I am also a traditional hunter and trapper living off the land. So we trap everything from lynx, wolverine, wolf, pine marten, muskrat, mink, all whatever's there. You kind of look and you see the tracks, you identify the animal, and then you set a trap. I'm pretty new to it. I grew up hunting and fishing, but some elders talked to me about trapping, and And I had did it a bit when I was a kid with my grandfather, but I grew up in a YouTube age, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna check out some videos, and I watched videos, and I learned techniques from there, and I started to do those, and I've actually been very successful in catching like beavers. I catch lots of beavers, and even like wolverine and stuff. I actually have here. Watch, I'll show you. You see my wolverine?
Oh
So I actually have a wolverine stuffed in my living room.
That's so cool. I want a Wolverine.
So, but it's all being kind of self-taught. Beaver is not so valuable right now. It's a lot of work to kind of process the fur, stuff like that. I do catch beaver's not worth much, so it's not much of a point to actually
Sell the fur.
Sell the fur. You do more work than it's actually worth. I do catch some of them. I catch some for food, and I catch some for bait. We use beavers to catch other animals because the meat is very greasy. It's got a very interesting smell to it and very interesting texture, and it works really good in the cold weather here. So our first chunk of bait. So let's go in and set the trap now. So what I've done, have my bait in the bottom, my trap sitting on the top. I have my trap set closest to the board as I could, just so I can. The animal will usually run up and down the tree. So he's going to be closest to this. This is a martin gland lure. So it's pretty putrid smelling. You take that. You take a stick. You dip it in. And you stick it somewhere like that. It's got a really kind of rotten fish smell. I don't know if the cameraman wants to take a whiff. They're pretty, I don't want to say easy to catch, but because of their habits and the foods that they eat, you can kind of pick areas for them that they'll always frequent, because they always have to go in there and eat. Beavers are pretty interesting animals. Their teeth constantly grow, so they always have to eat trees and stuff to keep wearing them down. And I got a few little props here.
Oh wow!
So here, I know you guys can see it. This is a small beaver skull, so you can kind of see the teeth. There's these big orange teeth, but they're really long. Like these teeth here are probably gonna go to about this far back into his head. And to show that, I have another one here that I can pull the tooth out. So you can see how long the beaver tooth is.
Oh wow!
So he's got to keep on eating because that tooth keeps on growing. And then in the winter time, you find the beaver house. Like here, it's pretty darn cold. Well, it's just warmed up now. We just went through a span of about -40 for about 2 weeks. So the ice is pretty thick. So what we'll do is we'll look around and we'll find a beaver house. So what the beaver does is he collects all his foods from the shorelines and he makes a big pile of food in the front of his door. So that's the feed pile. So we know the beaver swims from his house to the feed pile to eat back to his house, and he does this back and forth thing. So the bubbles that he ejects gets all caught up on the ice, and it actually melts the ice a bit. So from the beaver entrance to the beaver feed pile, it's usually thin ice, and that's how we know where they swim. So you take an axe and you bang around, and you'll hit a spot where the ice sounds hollow. It's like solid. All of a sudden, you get this hollow knock, and you know, okay, that's where the thin ice is. You take your chainsaw or you take your axe and you chop your hole there. Ice maybe 2.5 feet on the outsides of that, and maybe 3 inches. So that's the difference.
That's huge.
And that's why you have to be really careful when you're beaver trapping, because if you step in the wrong spot, you go through that ice, you can freeze to death. So beaver trapping in the winter can be a little bit hairy if you're not paying attention, but it's a good way to catch them, and you can pretty much in the winter you can clean out a whole household in maybe a week or two.
Goes off, it just goes straight, and then he dangles. So hopefully we'll see some dangling.
What is eating beaver like? You know, what does it taste like? How do you cook it? The different parts of the beaver?
So it's pretty simple ways to cook it. It's most of like I've had it boiled, fried, and smoked. So boiled beaver, it's just like almost kind of any kind of boiled meat. It tastes a little bit like, I don't want to say like you're eating a stick, but it kind of has a woody taste to it. I always find that the animals, they'll get the taste of what they have around. So I find with the beavers, they kind of taste a little bit more like the surroundings. But they're a little bit of a tougher meat. So like, and it's good. I don't eat it all the time. I'll eat beaver maybe once a year, twice a year, but I'll eat moose 6-7 days a week sometimes.
There you go.
Do young people in your community like beaver? Is that like, I imagine tastes are changing over time, and how do you kind of keep the taste for traditional food alive, especially when you're kind of faced with easier food?
Yeah, and it's a great question because it's something that we struggle with. Like even with moose and things like that, kids would rather eat a chicken finger. Communities, we started a program called Choose Life. So we teach young kids in the schools how to live out in the land. That they can learn to trap beavers, they can learn to trap pine marten, lynx, all these things. They show the kids, okay, this is how you butcher up a moose. This is skinning. This is how you take out the nose, the tongue, all these things. So you do the same thing with the beaver. If they trap a couple of beavers, like these groups of kids, they bring them back to the school and they do skinning and they do all these things. So that's kind of how we're trying to keep things going. The way I kind of tell kids is it's kind of like a video game when you're going out there and you're driving through your trap line and all of a sudden you see, oh, there's a marten track there. And it's awesome. Like the feeling you get, it's just something else. And that's even like with beaver trapping, all those things, like when you figure it out and you catch that first animal, you feel so good.
Put the work in, you take the time, and you see that like tangible reward of like fur and something you can eat that they've done, like a tangible skill that you can eat. Skills where you at the end you can eat are always the best skills.
Yeah, for sure. I want to see people still eating the way that I'm eating and they're eating now, like 20-30 years down the road. I just there, and we just have to make sure that, you know, Mother Earth has hers and we have ours, and like that we're all able to kind of make sure that you know, that supply is there for future generations. We're Northerners, and we live in the North, and we stay in the North. But yeah, I definitely think that there's the land is a place, you know, to heal. It's a place to grow, and it's a place to you know, live. That's us. You know, we are the land. And if we're not a part of it, then I think our people are in trouble.
Coming out in the land healed me. You know, it being out and doing all this stuff, it healed me. And that's something that I give the land a lot of credit for. Coming out and doing all this stuff and learning. And that's something that, you know, people don't realize, that the land is healing. You come out here, like, look how beautiful this is.
Traditional food is still an important part of the daily lives of many Indigenous people and is an important link between health, culture, and identity. At the Menoyawan Health Centre in Sioux Lookout in Northern Ontario, Kathy Loon leads the traditional food program that serves wild game such as beaver to patients.
My name is Kathy Loon. I'm the traditional program manager at the Sioux Lookout Menoyawan Health Centre in Sioux Lookout, Ontario. Our mission program is we are able to serve uninspected wild meats and games to patients in the hospital as well.
Would you define what is traditional food? Just so for people who don't know.
Traditional food, I define it as foods that come from the land. It's either animals or plants that come from the land. In the area where the people that we serve come from.
Why was it so important to serve traditional foods such as beaver in a hospital? Like, why was that so important?
Traditional food, food is medicine. It goes into your body. It can heal you, or it can make you sick if you're not eating the right kind of food. So we believe food is medicine. The First Nations people in the area have gone through very rapid and dramatic lifestyle changes. We went from a hunter-gatherer society. In a very short period of time. We started living in what's called reservations in this area. And for a long time in the early 1900s, we weren't allowed to leave the reservations. This is the colonizing of Anishinaabe people. And so we went from a hunter-gatherer society to purchasing our food that was not very healthy. It was very high in salt, high in preservatives. See, somebody can change their lifestyle in a very short period of time, but it takes many generations for your genetics to change in order to fully adapt to eating new foods. There are consequences. And so what's happened to us is we have a lot of high diabetes rates in the area, very high diabetes rates, heart problems, cancer rates is going up really high, and there's a lot of mental health issues as well, that because everything is connected, your physical, your spirit, your mind, your body. Eating traditional food heals us physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So the elder that's in the hospital, for example, if you go and present him either beaver or geese or moose, he knows that you're respecting his culture. The land is our church, in other words. And being out there makes us very strong spiritually. So you're taking that when you remind them of, younger days when they were hunting and stuff like that, you're bringing that elder back to a time when they were the strongest spiritually, and that promotes healing. Beaver and the muskrat are very healthy foods, but the beaver itself, it's an acquired taste. All animals, they have that taste of the types of foods that they eat. I'm a firm believer that animals that live naturally, they taste like what they eat. You can taste a little bit of, I don't know, probably not too many people will eat the chunk of poplar poplar bark, but that's literally what their meat tastes like. So A, it's an acquired taste. B, the meat itself is extremely rich. It's very rich. It's very robust. And so you can only eat a little bit if you're not accustomed to eating it, and it will go right through you. Yes.
Do you enjoy beaver?
Yes, I do. I've told the kitchen staff, when they ask me how to cook it, I say exactly the same way you would cook a turkey. Mhm.
Interesting.
Eating traditional foods like the beaver, or the moose, or the deer, or caribou, elk, um, those animals are free. They're in a good place. They're surviving in their environments. There's no stress. There's no they're in a good place mentally, spiritually, and so they're happy. And when you eat them, there's nothing negative. There's it's good food. It's really good food. It's good. It's nutritious. It's good soul food. I firmly believe that people should eat their own culturally appropriate foods, and nobody should dictate otherwise. Because that's how your body has evolved, right? It's the only food that's healthy for you.
I guess it goes hand in hand with kind of rediscovering your own roots and thinking about food. Yeah, and there you go. It makes food so much deeper because it's never just food. It's also culture and history and society.
Very much so. Very much
all in
so.
one. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to. My family's Irish. I'll try and make some potatoes tonight to call my grandmother.
Pull out grandma's recipe and then sit there and eat it. You're going to be very happy inside, emotionally, spiritually, because grandma is safe. Grandma is good. Grandma is love, right? And you're going to be filled with that. So it's not just food that hits your stomach. It's the emotional, it's the spiritual, it's the physical, it's all of those.
Leaders like Mark and Kathy are championing Indigenous food like beaver and showing just how important and tasty eating traditional food is to Indigenous communities across Canada. While traditional game may not get the same recognition as the deep-fried donut beaver tail, Indigenous chefs are promoting cooking with traditional ingredients such as beaver tail, like actual beaver's tail.
It's a delicacy. Mostly for old timers, they like it because it's fatty and it's easy to eat.
Yeah, see, the way my mom and my grandpa, my parents taught me was like it bubbles up in the flame, and then you were able to just peel it. But I'm digging this new way that you're showing me, because I think the flavor of the charcoal is gonna bring like another flavor. Yeah. I didn't appreciate beaver tail when I was younger, like you said, because, it was the older people that ate it. But now, like, the way I cook it, because I cook it in maple syrup, and I love maple syrup, that's the way I eat my beaver tail now. It's like maple sugar-coated beaver tail.
Thank you so much to Mark and Kathy for agreeing to talk to me bright and early because of the time difference. And if you're wondering whether I suddenly got way better at taking videos because of all the shots of Mark trapping, I did not. I did not take a sneaky trip to Canada to shoot them. It's from a videographer, Crow Creator. I'll link them down below. Go watch for way better videos than anything I could ever make. Now, like I promised Kathy, I'm off to call my grandmother whilst cooking some potatoes. Thanks so much for watching.